Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of Neutrality Studies. Because today I'm joined not by one, not by two, but by five wonderful guests, and we have a sixth one coming soon. I'll put this a bit like this. This is an episode shared with Félix Marquardt, from who's running a wonderful experiment. Actually, it's called the Black Elephant, in which he has developed a very special format to talk to guests and to work with vulnerability as a way to get a meaningful conversations going. So what we said we would do today is to use that format and mix it a bit with a political format to discuss one of the problems of our times, which is the violence that is engulfing West Asia, which is doing very horrible things to many people. And we have wonderful guests here, which I will actually leave up to Felix to introduce to everybody. Just me, myself. I'm Pascal Lottaz. I'm an associate professor at Kyoto University, originally from Switzerland, and now working and living in Japan. And our other guests are also from around the world. Felix, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Pascal. What a great pleasure it is to co-host this with you. This episode 0 of the Black Elephant Experience is the fruit of conversations that emerged with you. So I'm delighted that we do this episode together, that we're doing this episode 0 together. I would like to start by welcoming. We had a slightly larger panel, actually, and much more gender balance. So this was not intended to be a manel. I would like to start out by putting that out there. We have our last guest, who should be arriving any second, is Melek, who is from Gaza, but currently based in Qatar. Aside from her, we have I want to say, legendary historian Ilan Pape. Thrilled to have you here, Ilan, really.
Thank you.
Great pleasure again. Murtaza Hussein from Dropsite News. Welcome, Maz. And Mohammed Jalal from The Thinking Muslim. And there's Melek. Welcome.
Hi. How are you? Thank you.
Wonderful.
Good to see you.
Wonderful to have you. So, Melek, I was just saying that it was not intended that you are the only woman on this panel. Forgive us, but there were last-minute cancellations, and here we are. Let me tell you a bit about how Black Elephant started. So during the pandemic, a bunch of a motley crew of people who were damaged in various ways, yours truly included, got together and realized that because we had learned to wrestle with our trauma and that we had to do some work to deal with it, we had learned that sort of almost what we saw as a superpower, which was the ability to not just talk about what we were thinking about what was going on, but to go to places where most people don't go with people that they don't know, and to talk about things that are more personal, more intimate. So not just what's happening on the front of the stage, but what's happening in backstage, in the background. And as my work is, I come from media. I worked for the New York Times Company, and then worked with the New York Times Company for years. But I've disconnected from that, and eventually I have come to the conclusion, as a drug addict in recovery, that there is a neglected relationship between propaganda on the one hand and addiction on the other, and they they explode in terms of their importance in the 20th century around the same time, and it's not by chance. So here we have several people. I mean, almost all of you, I would say, apart from Malak and me, we have people who are really working hard on a daily basis to enlighten people about what's really going on in the world, rather than what we are told in various mainstream media. But what I took away from that experience that I mentioned during the pandemic and the birth of Black Elephant is that you don't need just to have meaningful information to be able to function properly in this world. So you do need it. You really do need information that is disconnected from power. But you also need something else. You need connection. You need to be able to connect at a deeper level with other people. And when you put the two together, it radically changes the way you interact with them. So I'm not going to say more at this stage. I'll have a bit more to say at the end of this session. But for now, I would like to just explain how this works. So we do 2 rounds where we don't answer each other. We just answer we just answer the same questions. The first round is more towards the personal, although not exclusively, and the second really goes to the question of the day, which is today: are the genocide in Gaza and the war in Iran the product of Zionism, U.S. empire, or Western modernity? And I should have said or rather than or, obviously. So before we go to, let's just dive into round 1. And I'm going to start because this is sort of a muscle, and I think it makes sense that I have training in this. So I'll start, and then I'll call on one of you, and we can do this first round. So the first round is the question is where. So you guys know it, who are here, dear guests. So for the public, where I was born in Paris. I'm going to use it. So last thing I should have mentioned, I'm going to use a timer, and I will please sort of pay attention if I tell you, to ensure that we all divide times, that we share the time in a relatively equal fashion. I'm going to show my timer if you've gone on too long, so to speak. So let me start. Okay, so I was born in Paris of parents who are both not French, but I live in Athens in Greece. My father was German, but he grew up in Austria, and my mom was born in New York and grew up there. But they met in New York, moved to Paris, and so that's where I grew up. One thing that people don't know about me is that I know a prodigiously embarrassing number of people in the Epstein files, as I've shared with Murtaza. So that's one thing people don't know, and I've been wrestling with that realization since the Department of Justice put them out. And so I'm going to speak about one parent or friend and how they connect to current events. And I'm going to talk about my father. My father died in a couple months before October 7. And he was a German man born in 1945. And the fact that the fact that he was German and born in 1945 really impacted his way of wrestling with history and with like his Germanness, and the way he one of the ways that he tried to deal with the Nazi era as someone born in 1945 is he almost instinctively went towards with people of the Jewish faith. And he made friends with them. He was really like the definition of a philo-Semite. And because he died a couple months before October 7, I went to his funeral in Vienna, literally it was 10 days, it was a week exactly before October 7. And 90% of the people present were Jewish. And because they were mostly boomers, I knew a week later that conversations with this whole world defined by my dad, which was a big part of my life, were going to become very, very complicated. And I've been wrestling with that since then. And it's a big part of the novel that I am about to publish, which is called The Strange Collapse of the Times. So that is me. And now I'm going to pass it on to Pascal.
Thank you very much, Felix. And may I just interject also for everybody who's watching, we forgot to tell you that we have prepared 2 questions, and the first one actually being this one for everybody to answer one after another. Tell us your first name, place of origin, current whereabouts, and one thing most people don't know about you. Finally, tell us of a friend or a family member and how they connect to current events. And then we're going to go into the second one after that. Apologies that we didn't mention this earlier. Again, my name is Pascal Lottaz. I'm the host of the YouTube show Neutrality Studies, currently in Japan. And I something that most people don't know about me is I was kind of wondering which thing I should talk about, but I'm going to mention again that I'm Swiss. Both of my parents are Swiss, but one of my grandmothers is German. And that German grandmother who passed away a couple of years ago, during the Second World War, she was a child. She was very young, so she never had a lot of memories about it. But one thing she did remember was her older brother, who she loved dearly and whom she talked about a lot and said what a wonderful and warm-hearted person he was. Now, the problem is that wonderful and warm-hearted person also he died in the war in an SS uniform somewhere in Eastern Europe. He died at the age of 26 or 27. And that event was from that event, I mean, that knowing that and hearing how my grandmother talks about him as a lovely person who she misses dearly, and knowing that he fought for such a horrible government and was probably involved in this extermination of so many innocent people, of Jews and Roma and undesirables, that he was, even if he wasn't involved in the actual killing, that he was involved in the machine that killed these people. That ever since I was 13, 14, that kind of was like in my mind, and how it happened. I saw a picture of him, of a good-looking young man, and that this kid basically did like participate and did perpetrate these kind of things, and that he probably thought it was a good idea, that he probably did this because he wanted to do it, because he wanted to be part of this movement, and that in this youth of his, he believed that it was the right thing to do. That is something that kind of keeps me awake until now. I mean, this question of why good people do evil deeds, and I think that's the connection to right now, because I don't believe that what's happening in West Asia can be reduced to the evilness of one or the other person. It's a system, and we ought to figure out what the different parts of the system are that then at the other end create mass dying. And with that out of the way, I would like to call on Malak to give us your answers to your first name, place of origin, current whereabouts, and one thing most people don't know about you, and how a family member and how it impacts current events.
Okay, this is probably going to be the most Arab thing. I like my name to be pronounced as Malak, not Malak. And this is something I always get. So my first name is Malak. And I am from Gaza. I grew up, lived my whole life in Gaza. But I am currently a resident in Qatar. I did my studies here, my master's, and then the genocide started. So I thought, okay, I don't have much of an option, so I'm just gonna stay here. Started working, and that's about it. One thing most people do not know about me, and this is very dear to my heart, I don't think I've ever shared this with anyone, is that most people are intimidated to come nearby me or to get closer to me because they think I'm somehow privileged. And I always get self-absorbed, which hurts. And so most people have this idea about me and they avoid me for some reason. And once they get to know me, this is the first thing they reveal. And it's kind of shocking for me. It's like everyone avoids you because they think you are avoiding them. But in fact, you are just so lonely because everyone is avoiding you. The one person I'm going to talk about who had a great impact on my life and who has a great connection to what's happening in the world is Dr. Rifat Larair. I think I have been very privileged to be a student of his. I was a student of Dr. Rifat, a colleague, and most importantly, I think, a friend. So I remember Dr. Rifat taught us this one sonnet for John Donne. It said, death be not proud. And it just shocks me till this day how Dr. Rifat taught us that somehow John Donne himself, of course, he passed, but then he outlived death because his writings and his sonnets are still till this day, and we still read them and reflect on them and study them. This pretty much connects to Dr. Rifat because Israel thought, okay, we killed Rifat, but Dr. Rifat he outlived death because till this day we still read his poems, we still remember him, we still talk about him. And one of the things I noticed about Dr. Rifat is that if you go back to his Twitter account, for example, this is one example, and you read his tweets, you cannot just put them in a timeline. They fit every situation, and it's like he's with us. That's why I still do not talk about him in past tense. I just refuse to talk about him in past tense. And when I do, I just feel bad because it's like he's here with us. He literally outlived death. I would like to pass it to Mr. Jalal.
You're still muted.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, it's so my name is Muhammad Jalal. I was born in Britain, in the UK, in London, in a place called Hackney, which is the east of London. I grew up in London, and I've been a Londoner really since birth. And I'm here at the moment talking to you from just outside London, but I reserve the right to call where I live London still. something that no one knows about me. So, as you may know, I started a podcast which very much focuses on current events, ideological fissures that exist within the broader world, as well as within the Muslim community, called a Thinking Muslim. And often when people ask me, why did you begin the podcast? I normally say because we've got some great minds within the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community, so many of them currently on this panel, who really need to be heard by members of the Muslim community. But that's part of it. I think really fundamentally, the reason why I began the podcast was back in 2018. My son passed away, and it was a shock to the system, and it made me realize that life is temporary, and life isn't just about accumulating wealth or becoming a successful person in one's career. I used to be a lecturer. I taught politics for a very long time, but life is more than that, and until and unless we make something of our lives, we are in a position, maybe a privileged position, and I think we are, most of us, in a very privileged position, until and unless we're able to use our talents and our expertise and our knowledge and whatever we have at our disposal, our resources that so many of us have, until we use those for the sake of justice and for the sake of doing something good that you can, in my case, I'm a believer. I believe in God. I believe in Allah, and I know that when I return to my Lord, I want to return with a semblance of work that I think would add something to my scale, to my weight. So I think it was really about death, and for so many of us on this panel, I suspect trauma or loss can really propel you in a different direction to maybe where you were previously. And every loss has a silver lining. I think of course a loss of that gravity was a shock to all of my whole family. But for sure, I feel that if it wasn't for that loss, I wouldn't have focused my mind as I would have wished to. The next question was someone who's had an impact on me, and again to continue that conversation about loss. This time last year, in fact, my dear wife passed away, and I just want to say a few words about her. She was a courageous individual, but someone who never really lost sight of believing in seeking justice. Even during her illness, she had cancer. She would go on demonstrations, she would go on marches, she would tweet, she would send out Instagram posts, she would, put together podcasts to talk about Palestine, to talk about the Uyghurs, to talk about all sorts of areas where people are facing immense injustice. And I think that was, again, something that I look back on with admiration, that you have someone who's going through, personally going through such hardship, yet she never really forgot her need, her duty to speak truth to power, to speak up for justice. And I think that's something that in the darkest days, when I think to myself, oof, this is too much going on. What's happening in Palestine just hurts us, intensely. But I feel that maybe just to end the point, but I feel that we probably need to learn from people who are better than us, who are able to withstand those travesties and just day by day work for justice. And I know so many on this panel are like that, and I salute all those people in Gaza in particular, who just continue despite despite all of the hardships they face. So yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you so much. I'll pass it on to Ilan. Can you guys hear me properly? You hear me better, Ilan?
Oh, yeah. Yes, now I can, yeah, but
okay. Wonderful.
Your early intervention was
muffled.
Not very muffled. Yes.
Okay. Anyway. Apologies.
I will. Maybe it's only on my side. I don't know.
Okay. I will raise my phone if the time is running out, just so you guys know.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Sure. So I was born in Haifa, where I'm talking to you now, and I was. If I'm thinking about something nobody knows about me, quite a public figure, it's difficult to say. When I saw the question, I actually thought of something relatively esoteric, but maybe helping to understand some impossible realities we live in. In around, I think it was the 15th or the 16th of July, 2023, a friend of mine from Al-Azhar University in Gaza called me, and he also put the rector of the university on the phone, and they said, can you come to a conference that we are doing on the 10th of October 2023 in the university about oral history, the importance of oral history. I share my time, I'm most of the time in the UK, where I teach in Exeter, but family and a lot of friends, most Palestinian friends, are still here in the Galilee, so I commute as much as I can between the two places. And I thought, of course, I said yes, and then I said, how do I get into Gaza? This is, of course, before the 7th of October, but I'm sure you understand that even before the 7th of October, it was not easy to get into the Strip, given the Israeli siege and blockade of the place. I have a European passport next to my Israeli one, and I began to negotiate with the German embassy in Cairo, because I knew that in order to get in, I would need wasn't their permission, but they had to be involved. I don't remember now exactly the details. Anyway, it was two things were very clear to me. A, that everything was ready for me on the 10th to cross through Rafah. And secondly, I already knew what would happen to me when I would come back, if I went back to Haifa, and I was willing to take that into account. And then the 7th of October occurred 3 days before the intended conference, and I have to postpone that visit. But of course, everything has so dramatically changed, especially for Gaza and its people. The level of destruction is something that was unimaginable and horrendous and horrific, and the Israeli criminal and genocidal policy escalated to levels that were not there before. But somehow, sometimes the private story intertwines with a more collective one. And the people I'm thinking about, I was particularly thinking about one of my first PhD students, Malaka Shweiki from Gaza, whom we succeeded in getting a scholarship to the University of Exeter. She did a PhD, a brilliant PhD, on hunger strikes as a weapon of resistance. in the University of Exeter, finished with flying colors, and rightly so. She now is a lecturer in St Andrews University in Scotland, and uh, thinking about her and my very good friend and co-author Ramzi Suleiman, who lost Ramzi Baroud, I'm sorry, Ramzi Baroud, who lost 16 members of his family, including his sister and his brother-in-law. Uh, how personal these traumatic, uh, momentous moment in the life of Palestine and its people, how they actually, if you are intimately connected and involved with the Palestinians, I think you see that even in a more powerful way, and you can only be active, not because of the general knowledge that you have, which by itself should move people, I think, for the case of Palestine, but if it's connected to people who have names, who are friends, who have been friends for, in my case, for more than 50 years, that gives another dimension. And how to convey that dimension to a wider audience, because we still need to expand the solidarity with the Palestinians in order to face the existential danger Palestinians are now confronting, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and inside Israel. Um, I think that is how to humanize and make it a personal issue and not just an issue of moral justice or of principle, but you feel committed to people you know, even if you don't really know them, and that's why I think story like Hind Rajab became so powerful in galvanizing people. People feel like they know someone they don't know really. But I thought this is something. These are the people I'm thinking about. Uh, and I have also few students who are from Tehran, who were my PhD students over the years. And for me, what's happening to them is far more important than what's happening to Iran right now. Because this mixture of you care about individuals, and then you care about the nation, then you care about the cause, and so on. And it's not easy to navigate. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ilan. Maz, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I'm Mortaza Hussein. I'm a journalist. I live in New York. I grew up most of my life around here, but my family originally is from Pakistan. I think we were talking earlier, Felix, about the origins. I'm actually not very good at personal reflections, to be honest. I didn't remember. That's one of the things that's most probably notable about me. But I was thinking about that. It's interesting because my family they lived in India for a very very long time. We actually had a family tree. We charted the origins of our family or lineage going back maybe like 800, 900 years. And then when the partition happened of India and Pakistan, they left to Pakistan. And it was a very traumatic thing, which no one ever really talked about. And obviously, we were uprooted, and then the whole family is scattered all over the world, and there's not really concentrated anywhere in particular. But it was just always this very devastating thing, and being uprooted after so long, it kind of changes everything about the way you see the world and so forth. So, most of my family now lives either in the Middle East or the West, or some of them live in Pakistan, some in India, and you can't really, you've been alienated from them. And I actually can't return to Pakistan. I can't, because of political reasons, my reporting, I can't go there myself. And my wife is not Pakistani, so it's another level of attenuation. But it was interesting because a couple of years ago, my grandmother's still alive, and she grew up in India. She grew up in Hyderabad, in India, and that's like where that side of the family is from. And she actually went back and returned to Hyderabad a few years ago. And she's in her 90s, and she met her school friends that she'd gone to school with in India at that time, who were Hindu and different backgrounds, other minority sects of India and so forth. But the partition, of course, was a religious-based partition, so she had left to Pakistan. And they met, and it was very touching actually, because they had this recollection, and the what Ilan was saying, the vast macro political context was sort of distilled to this relationship all these old women had with each other who had been friends when they were very young, when they were just been children. So it was kind of a very kind of poignant moment, and it was sort of made me realize this whole thing had been such a mistake, or if not a mistake, at least it had been just something which had not really been thought through so well, and impacted all of our lives, this huge ripple and so forth. So when I think about the origins, I think about that kind of the origin point has been so kicked out, and then who knows what will happen in the future. Even now, the story is still playing out. But yeah, that's kind of my background and how I got here in that sense.
Thank you so much, Maz. Thank you all for this first round. Before we delve into the second round, we have a little video that we wanted to play. Are you ready, Pascal, to put it on?
Let me see if we can put it on with a couple of us. Okay, here we go.
It feels like it captures this moment for the West.
It's a very famous one.
We should be able to hold them at this.
Thanks, Pascal.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies? So the second round, we will be answering the following question. Are genocide in Gaza and the Iran war products of Zionism, US empire, and or Western modernity? Maybe I'll just start by giving you a couple hints at why I came up with this question and why we decided to go with it with Pascal. I remember thinking in the months that followed October 7, as I saw many testimonials from I can't remember the name of this music festival that was taking place, I saw no comment anywhere in the Western press about a simple question, which I felt was really critical, which was, what kind of society thinks it's okay, thinks it's imaginable to have a music festival, a techno music festival, a stone's throw from a concentration camp. And I just looked for references to this, for questioning, and I just couldn't find it. And the other thing that I want to mention is I spoke about my dad earlier on. There was a moment where I really sort of was a wake-up call for me, was when I read Aimé Césaire, his discourse on colonialism. Césaire is like the cousin of Frantz Fanon from Martinique. And in his discourse on colonialism, he I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he said something which I felt was so incredibly powerful, which was that he was speaking to the French, but indirectly he was speaking to the West. And he said, you pretend that what has shocked you to no end is what man can do to man, the realization and the horror in being confronted with the abject reality of what humans are capable of doing to humans. But actually, what disgusts you, what shocks you, is that you have done to white people in Europe what your civilization has been doing all around the world to people who don't have white skin. And I think that's sort of what is behind this question. And I will ask Ilan to go first in answering.
Yes. Well, I think we should, in a way, look first of all differently on the genocide in Gaza and the war in Iran when unpacking the three elements that you're talking about: Zionism, American imperialism, and modernism. I think in the case of Gaza, it is definitely the result of Zionism. It's Zionism as an ideology of a settler colonial movement, and an ideology, like all ideologies, that does not stay in the books or in theory, but evolves in relationship to realities on the ground. Some ideologies become softer, some ideologies become harsher, more fundamentalist. In the case of Zionism, the latter is the correct case. Namely, it started already as a settler colonial ideology that viewed the Palestinians as the major obstacle for the project of building a Jewish state in Palestine. And from that ideology, the strategy that other settler colonial projects adopted, which the late Patrick Wolf called the elimination of the native, emanated and led to the ethnic cleansing, the massive ethnic cleansing of 1948. But the Palestinian resistance to it and the inability to square the circle that Zionism always wanted to square between a wish to have a liberal democratic state, but at the same time maintain this basic logic of elimination of the natives, as if this was possible to reconcile the two. The total failure of this reconciliation hardened, I would say, Zionism, made it a far more harsh ideology at its very center. And probably the last 26 years were the phase in which Zionism escalated in two ways. One is it kind of got rid of its more ambivalent, I would say, margins, where people were still hoping somehow what we used to call liberal Zionism or left Zionists, who tried to still find a way of how somehow reconcile universal values, and doesn't matter which one they were, and the actual racist nature of Zionism. And this disappeared as we go through the 21st century. And unfortunately, the outcome of such a disappearance is that if there were inhibition, and there was some inhibition in the Israeli policy towards the Palestinians, they slowly disappeared. And the last kind of hindrance, or the last kind of complication, if you want, in how to deal with the issue of Palestine and the Palestinians, was removed, and when Israel decided to abandon, in a way, a policy of incremental genocide in Gaza and incremental ethnic cleansing in the West Bank into explicit genocidal policy in Gaza and an explicit policy of ethnic cleansing. So the first answer is when it comes to Gaza, the focus should be on Zionism. Of course, Zionism cannot have been successful in its policies of genocide and ethnic cleansing without American imperialism. You take American imperialism out of the equation, you get a far weaker Zionist movement in the past and a far weaker Israel in the present. And its America and its imperialist orientation is a very important, I would say, crucial member in the international coalition that both gives Israel immunity, but also provides Israel with a material means of implementing the ideology. Modernity has something to do with it, because I don't think modernity is the right term. I think modernization is important rather than modernity. Modernity can be a fact. Modernization is an ideology. And it's an ideology that goes together with imperialism and colonialism and Zionism. And therefore, it provides the scholarly, the philosophical, sometimes the moral scaffolding that allows people in the West to regard such atrocities as the genocide, as self-defense of the Jewish state, allows them to look at Iran as another reincarnation of Nazi Germany, and therefore, even if it's a lunatic president of the America that is leading the way, it is so-called justified and so on. So I think modernization rather than modernity, I would put it into the mix. As for Iran, we are in this, and with this I will finish. The eternal question, of course, is the tail wagging the dog or the dog tagging the whale, and we're always asking this question about Israeli-American relationship, especially when we are analyzing American policy in the Middle East. I think that each period of American imperialism and intervention in the Middle East has to be examined separately. I don't think you can, as an historian, that's my view, you don't really have an ability to have an overall analysis of American policy from 1945 until today, because it went through quite fundamental changes. Right now, and that's probably which is far more important than the historical roots, I would say. Right now, it's very clear that within the kind of Republican mindset that both brought someone like Trump to such a powerful position and allowed Trump to take the American national interest, the American military, the American economy even, into this horrific adventure. Right now, it's very clear that within the entourage around Trump, you had two camps of his base. One camp that was totally opposed to this policy, still is opposed to this policy, and one camp that also included Christian Zionists, who was very enthusiastic about this behavior that totally violates international law and every a kind of consensus we had in the past about world affairs. The balance was quite delicate, and I think that's where Netanyahu and Israel played a very important role in tipping the balance towards the action and overcoming the internal kind of hesitation about this move. But generally speaking, American imperialism is going back to the harsh imperialism, the territorial imperialism, leaving aside, I mean, if Trump and his kind of ideology orientation would succeed, they have definitely put aside the clandestine imperialism that characterized American involvement in the Middle East, and they're going back to the age of imperialism, as Eric Hobsbawm used to write about it, namely what one should call territorial imperialism, not only in the Middle East, also towards Cuba, Venezuela, and God knows where else, which in a way exposes again the connection between modernization that in the West is equated with enlightenment, progress, secularism. It will expose again this pretense that these values are universal and can only be interpreted by so-called Western civilization. Sometimes people like to call it the Judeo-Christian civilization. I think it's like every moment of horror in history, it has a positive side to it, because the destruction is so total that we might rethink some of the taken for granted, as Michel Foucault would have put it, taken for granted values, universal values, international law, and so on, that the West was able to monopolize the rest of the world for quite a long time. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Ilan. I'll pass it on to Murtaza.
There was a book written many years ago by a gentleman named Zygmunt Bauman. He was a Polish philosopher. And he wrote a book. I was very influenced by his writings, actually. He wrote a book called The Holocaust and Modernity. And his contention in the book was that the Holocaust obviously was caused to some degree by anti-Jewish sentiments and anti-Semitism and so forth. But he said that it didn't really make sense what happened in Germany for that reason then, because at that time, according to his assessment, France was a much more anti-Semitic society, probably didn't happen in France, things like that. And what he actually said was that the Holocaust was the product of a particular development in modernity, such that the whole idea of modernity was that if improvement of society through technology, and it was actually not a product of excessive hatred, although that was part of it, but it was a product of seeing technology as a means of solving a problem in society, which was a certain group of people as a problem. And he analogized the German attitude towards Roma people and Jewish people and Slavs and so forth as sort of like the way they saw it was like almost like gardening or reforming society in a technological way. And then the tools of doing it were very highly technological as well too. They were using locomotives and trains and gas and all these things to accomplish this in a more effective way. And the whole time it was seen as sort of a improvement from their eyes of society, from a genetic standpoint, from a hygienic standpoint, all these ways. That was the way it was described. So I noticed that the way that the Israeli government now is talking about the issue of Palestinians and even Lebanese now, and even now to an extent Iranians, they're talking about it in the same way. They're not talking about it as a political violence as a tool to achieve a political end or to change a political outcome or create more favorable conditions for their advancement and negotiations to an end state and so forth. They're talking about it as there is a group of people who is a problem. They don't have any political salience or any political claim to make. How can we use this technological methods to remove these people? And by removing them, we will have improved the situation in our own society and in the region. And that's it. So you see a lot of discussion of the use of AI and air superiority and all these other tools. But the only goal really is the removal of a group of people who's deemed as unwanted. And what Bauman argued was this is very much part of modernity. It was actually not that the genocides did not happen historically in different ways they have, but the motivations and the drivers were very different and the way it was implemented was very different. But he said that it was really a very modern worldview to think that, if you deem your goal to improve things in your own perspective and you need to remove certain people to improve them, you can just apply technical methods to accomplish that. And then any other sort of human or political consideration can be swept aside or not deemed relevant. And that's even a break from, traditional beliefs in the Clausewitz and so forth. He also saw violence as being having a political end. But I noticed that the Israeli application of violence now has no political correlation. It's very much like the what was described to happen in the Holocaust, technical application of removing a certain group of people.
Thank you, Murtaza. This reminds me of an entire school of philosophy was based on some of those considerations, the Frankfurt School. So let me go to Malak. I'm sorry for mispronouncing. You're muted.
Malak, can you unmute yourself? You're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now? I wanted to hear it when I was saying that your pronunciation is really good. So I was not referring to you guys. Your pronunciation is good. It's pretty much intimidating to answer this question after Ilan and Murtaza had answered it. But my personal thinking and on my personal take on this, the genocide on Gaza, in the simplest of terms, is that it's basically Zionism, in the sense that Israel believes they are promised a state based on ethnic cleansing, and they're basing it on ethnic cleansing. So it's basically Zionism, but what made it possible for Zionism, or what paved the way for Zionism, is obviously the American impunity. That, and also when it comes to Western modernization, let's say it, they also made it easy or kind of legitimate. It's funny to say legitimate, but in that sense, because of their normalization for the colonial powers and the colonial domination. But I think the war on Iran is a little bit different. I think it's basically American, but it serves Zionism. That's my simple answer.
Thank you very much, Malek. I will call on Mohammed, and we'll close with Pascal.
Thank you so much. I think that the question itself maybe assumes that these are separable causes, and they're not. Zionism, American empire, and Western modernity are really not competing explanations. I think they're nested together, mutually reinforcing logics. What we're witnessing today is less a single cause and more a convergence of ideological, structural, and I think civilizational forces. Let's take Zionism as the immediate driver, as a tactical and ideological engine here. Now, Zionism operates here as a proximate ideological or ideology of action, particularly in Gaza. It's a settler colonial project with an internal logic of expansion, demographic engineering, and permanent insecurity. Gaza, in this sense, is not an aberration. It's the logical end, I think, of a project that cannot tolerate indigenous sovereignty. Like on Iran, Zionism acts as a strategic instigator, seeking to eliminate any regional power capable of deterrence or resistance. But Zionism alone cannot explain, I think, this regional war, or Zionism cannot even prosecute this regional war on its own. It really does need to have imperial sponsorship. And I think that's where the American empire comes in as the enabler, as the empire that provides material and strategic infrastructure. The US provides hard power architecture, weapons, diplomatic cover, intelligence, and escalation dominance. It's not just the US and its subordinate states or its allies, such as the powers in Europe, in the European Union, are all firmly, apart from Spain, of course, to its credit, are all firmly behind this so-called expedition to Iran, or I think he called it like Putin, a temporary, military camp, whatever the term was that they used. I think this is empire in its late phase. It's overextended, reactive, yet still overwhelmingly destructive. The Iran war in particular reflects a classic, I think, imperial pattern. Preemptive wars framed as security, a regime change logic, control of strategic geography, energy routes and choke points. It's really a war of choice rather than a war of necessity. And crucially, I think the US is not simply manipulated, as some within analytical circles argue. I think it's structurally aligned with Israel's objectives due to its shared strategic and ideological commitments. And that's where I think modernity comes in, or Western modernity, which provides the civilizational logic to Zionism, to American imperialism, to this war in Iran, to the genocide in Gaza. If Zionism is the trigger and empire the vehicle, I think that Western modernity is the operating system. It provides the moral vocabulary that makes this violence intelligible and justifiable. Civilization versus barbarism, security versus terror, order versus chaos. It normalizes there's industrial scale violence in Gaza, which has become a laboratory of high-tech warfare. It normalizes such extreme use of violence. There's technocratic killing. Just think about how AI has been incorporated into this death machine. It's bureaucratized death we see in Gaza, and now we're seeing in Iran and over the skies of Tehran. It embeds these racial hierarchies in international law. Lest we forget, German Chancellor argued that Iran was outside of international law when talking about the moral leanings to this particular conflict. So it creates these hierarchies that persisted and existed within Western modernity for centuries, starting with John Locke and today ending with Donald Trump. I think this sort of European chauvinistic logic remains embedded within the discourse that Western modernity brings. This is why outrage in the West is pretty selective, because the system itself has graded humanity in a particular way. And so Palestinians or Iranians are not civilized, and so they're not afforded the type of consistency that Europeans or even the Ukrainians were afforded when they were unjustly invaded by Russian forces. So Zionism, I think, generates this immediate conflict. American empire scales and sustains it, and Western modernity legitimizes it and normalizes it. And in other words, without Zionism, there's just no Gaza genocide. There's no mass killing of people as we saw in Gaza. Without the US, there's not an ability to sustain or expand Israel regionally. And without Western modernity, there's no global tolerance for what we have witnessed over the past 2.5, almost 3 years. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. The floor is yours, Pascal.
Well, it's difficult to add things to this because it was beautifully laid out by everybody here. Maybe just the one thing I can add is some of the things that I was privileged to learn over the last 1 or 2 years, like talking to a lot of also academics. And maybe one of the most insightful things to me is that, there's really more Christian Zionists in the world than there's Jewish Zionists. And Zionism itself is, I view it as an inherently, not even American thing, imperial thing, but it's a European core fundamental way how Europe as a civilization kind of sprawled and grew, and how it embedded itself in every corner of the world. And I don't see it so much as an outcome of modernity. I mean, very much as Muhammad said, like modernity at the moment gives the vocabulary in order to kind of cushion all of this into a discourse of the good the good Israelis then keeping in check this evil that is terrorism, Muslim Palestinian terrorism, and so on. I mean, there you've got the framing that you need, but just think about it. I mean, these genocides that the Europeans have been committing over the centuries are just they go through history like a red line. And the amazing thing is that there's one genocide, one that is very deeply embedded and remembered today, and that's again, as you said, Felix, that's the one committed against the fellow whites in Europe. And we today connect the memory of Germany in the 1930s and 40s with the memory of that genocide, like very, very strongly. But when you talk about Belgium, when we talk about Belgium, would actually immediately connect it with the genocide in the Congo? 10 million people dead after 1885, right? It didn't happen much before that one. And the video we just watched about Are We the Baddies was created in order to show like how the Germans wouldn't question themselves, created by British comedians, the British who who committed several genocides, South Africa, in India, by people who are directly connected to the people who emptied 3 continents: North America, a good part of South America, and Australia, of their native populations. So this drive for expansionism and for Lebensraum, as the Germans called it, that the whites replace the others, and that the whites then even take the right to bring the unwilling blacks as slaves and to replace an entire population, right? That's hundreds of years of European way of doing things. They did it. They tried also in Asia. It didn't work. It failed at a much earlier stage. But in my interpretation, what we are seeing is just the latest version of something that has been happening so many times, and the effort to try to replace a native population by a non-native population and call them native population, and even insult the original native population by calling them the invaders, and mixing it up with the entire discourse about the foreigners in Europe and so on. It's mind-boggling to me, and it's mind-boggling that you don't get this kind of perception, which part of is part and parcel of how the system works, right? That you are able to say that no, the past is the past. Colonialism is long gone. Colonialism is something like feudalism. It has ended a long time ago. We know it was bad. We'd never do it again. And then once we do it again, we give it a new name and a new a new dressing. And the current dressing is what Mohammad, what you pointed out. But that's how the system keeps itself alive and then creates this enormous violence. I would never ever only blame the Americans. Not at all. It is a Euro-American settler colonial white basically crime, because of something that just makes apparently this form of violence very very digestible to large parts of Europe, and I can't put my finger on it yet what it is. Maybe it's religion, maybe it is this black and white thinking, I don't know, but something is there that makes this acceptable to them. And if we look at Iran, you see how the standards with which they conduct a war, and with which others conduct a war, and with which the Euro-Americans conduct their wars. It's just, there's something highly violent, and I leave it at that.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you all for that round. We're stretching. We're slightly pressed with time, so I don't think that we'll have the time to have as long a discussion as we initially thought. But still, I would like to start. At this point, you can just jump in, but I'll start this part of the show with Ilan. Pascal was just referring to selective memory, and in a way, your job as an historian is to ensure that we don't forget parts of the story. But somehow, I can't help, as I look at all these genocides, I can't help but look at the research that's been done about the school manuals that we are raised on, and I'd love you to speak to the hidden costs, and increasingly obvious but hidden costs, of selective hypermnesia.
Yeah, I think it's an important aspect of the ability to concoct narratives that justify inhumanity, barbarism, acts of mass killing, ethnic cleansing, and genocide in a way that is devoid of any historical context or a distorted historical narrative. I mean, there was never such an example, I think, as much as when it was very clear that the very demand of academics, journalists, activists after the 7th of October to historicize, to contextualize in an historical analysis the events of the 7th of October and what happened after the 7th of October. I don't remember such a moment where the very notion of historical context was deemed as an act that was illegitimate. If you remember, this is something that emanated first from the demand by Israel that the word context would not be mentioned in any analysis of the background to the Hamas operation and to the Israeli reaction to it. In Germany, it went to absurdity because lecturers got letters from the university administration telling them not to use the word context when analyzing what happened in Gaza. I mean, I'm sure there were other periods in history where the powers that be, for whatever reasons, either demanded that the historical context would not be mentioned or demanded that only one historical narrative would be legitimized and the other delegitimized. But I don't remember, especially not in countries that claim that they are the shrines of freedom of expression, freedom of research, freedom of opinion, that in those countries, rather than in more authoritarian regime, there would be a demand from the very people that they claim they created spaces for them to be able to be critical, to be able to offer alternative views because the rest of society is so busy with living. I don't remember a case where it was said, no, you cannot decontextualize. It's similar, a little bit similar to what happened, but for far shorter period in American universities after 9/11. You probably remember the debate of the core. Then it was not called the context; it was called the core issue. Its more popular version of the core issue was why do they hate us? And I remember being in New York at the time and asked by university authorities not to mention the core issue. What does the core issue meant? That there is an historical context that you have to teach and be familiar with if you want to understand 9/11, even without all the conspiracy theories, even if what you saw is what you got, right? And the American reaction to 9/11. So we were there in a way before, but never was the word historical context equated with anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial. Is unbelievable, especially when it comes from Germany. But it was not only in Germany. There were softer versions of this total rejection. I mean, even in my own university in Exeter, we had to fight for this. That it's, first of all, our scholarly duty, not just our moral duty, that it's our scholarly duty to give an historical context to what happened. And immediately the lobby was trying to tell our university that providing an historical context to what happened is supporting terrorism, anti-Semitism, and so on. So I think it's bad enough that you have a battle of narratives, and most settler colonialist and colonialist historiographies try to erase the indigenous history, not just through academic research by membricide of all kinds of destroying landmarks, history by appropriating the indigenous folklore and names and so on. But this is something we were more used to, and I think we knew how to handle it. But when it comes to such an explicit demand that history is not going to be factored into understanding moments of violence in our life is such a dangerous development, especially when it comes from the supposedly alleged societies that cherish the academic research as a space of freedoms, all kinds of freedoms. It's part of the, with this I will end. I think it's part of the crisis I talked about before. I think that the world order, the moral backbone, the alleged moral backbone, and the world order that the West had built immediately after the Second World War, traumatized by the Second World War, but unwilling to look at the fact that it is building a new world when 2/3 of the world is still colonized. And by totally ignoring, for instance, the Islamic contribution to what they call Judeo-Christian civilization, that was a very bad construction. But it took a while to be aware that there were already extensive cracks in these foundations, and it's collapsing. And collapse is never nice, you know. I've finished. I have a friend, Palestinian friend, whom I'm trying to encourage by telling him that I think empires fall, including the Zionist empire. He said, yes, but you have to be careful they don't fall on you. And I think he has a point. And he has a point. I understand what he means. So he said, don't, you know, this kind of optimistic long-term thing that empires, and history is cyclic, so surely this is going to happen. But he's absolutely right. There's something about the collapse of a powerful outfit that you have to be careful that it doesn't collapse on you, because you have to find a way of avoiding not the collapse, but the collateral damage that comes with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ilan. Thank you so much. I think we should slowly move towards closing. We're very grateful for your time, all of you. Maybe I was going to suggest, as we prepared for this show, I had a conversation with Melek about Rifat al-Harir, and I suggested that she read a poem of his before we part, and I'd like to dedicate this show to his memory.
May I suggest that we give the floor 1 more minute or 2 more minutes to Muhammad, and then Malak, your final thoughts, and then the poem?
That's a very, very good idea. My apologies, Muhammad.
Not at all. No, I would much more prefer to listen to the poem of Rafat. So I have nothing much more to say, actually. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for this wonderful gathering. Really wonderful.
Barakallahu fiqh.
In that case, Malak, please.
Okay, so the poem of Dr. Rifat al-Harir, you might be familiar with it. It's called I Am You. I'm not gonna elaborate. You're gonna listen to it. And again, it's such an honor that I'm going to recite his poem. 2 steps. 1, 2. Look in the mirror. The horror, the horror. The butt of your M16 on my cheekbone, the yellow patch it left, the bullet-shaped scar expanding like a swastika, snaking across my face, the heartache flowing out of my eyes, dripping out of my nostrils, piercing my ears, flooding the place like it did to you 70 years ago or so. I am just you. I'm your past, haunting your present and your future. I strive like you did. I fight like you did. I resist like you resisted, and for a moment I take your tenacity as a model. Were you not holding the barrel of the gun between my bleeding eyes? 1, 2. The very same gun, the very same bullet that had killed your mom and killed your dad is being used against me by you. Mark this bullet and mark in your gun. If you sniff it, it has your and my blood. It has my present and your past. It has my present. It has your future. That's why we are twins. Same life track, same weapons, same suffering, same facial expressions drawn on the face of the killer, same everything except that in your case, the victim has evolved backward into a victimizer. I tell you, I am you, except that I'm not the you of now. I do not hate you. I want to help you stop hating and killing me, I tell you. The noise of your machine gun renders you deaf. The smell of the powder beats that of my blood. The sparks disfigure my facial expressions. Would you stop shooting for a moment? Would you? All you have to do is close your eyes. Seeing these days blinds our hearts. Close your eyes tightly so that you can see in your mind eyes. Then look into the mirror. 1, 2. I am you. I'm your past, and killing me, you kill you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melek, for that reading. And thank you all for being with us. Murtaza unfortunately had to run to do the Drop Site News show. But we're very, very grateful. I know I am speaking in the name of Pascal as well, to have had you for this episode 0 of the Black Elephant Experience.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was nice
See you
meeting
soon
you
again.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.